Hi, I'm Danny Black, and welcome back to another edition of Hobby News Daily. I'm joined by Connor from BuySportsCards.com. Connor, how you doing today?
Doing great, Danny. Thanks for having me on.
I know Buy Sports Cards. I've talked to you going back a year or two now.
Mhm.
I guess one of the biggest things is introduce yourself to people who may not know you or not know the site, and what your background is in the hobby. So I want to start there. Definitely talk about your background in the hobby and what brought you to the website.
Yeah, so I think one of the really interesting things about buysportscards.com, and I think it's true of most businesses that start to see some success, is that the people that are building it really want to use it themselves. And, really, I think that's the only reason you'd want to do something as hard as what we've tried to do with buysportscards.com is that, the end goal for us is that we wanted to build a cool site that we wanted to use and that we didn't think was currently being offered in the market. And so, buysportscards.com is a marketplace that's focused 100% on sports cards. And we really looked kind of at the problem that sports cards have been around over 150 years. There's 17 to 18 million different cards that have ever been made across all the sports. And if you look at the most recent kind of parallels, there's 40 to 50 different color variations, sometimes 4 to 5 different purples or reds or blues. And, with my experience kind of in e-commerce and seeing other sites that have kind of flourished in the last several years, I thought if there's any industry that deserves more specialization and something that's really tailored exactly towards it, it'd be sports cards for kind of all the reasons that we mentioned. And so, when looking around the landscape, I didn't see a site that really was meeting my personal needs, both as a buyer and a seller. And so we decided to build buysportscards.com as a marketplace and really focus on making it as easy as possible to buy and sell sports cards by just focusing on sports cards and streamlining and refining the processes to reduce the friction to allow users to do that.
You came to a lot of those conclusions, you said, as a user yourself, or what you would like your experience to be. Can you
Mhm.
talk about your collecting background and why you would have those experiences?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is maybe unique in terms of people that have started companies in the hobby, but probably not unique to most people that may listen to this podcast or collect cards, is that I really enjoy the lower end of the market. I've got a few cards here, like this Upper Deck Power Up card, stuff like this that, I mean, this is the most expensive card in the set, and they may go for $100. But it's the stuff that I love because I grew up collecting it. And I think that with my experience kind of collecting lower end cards, I've kind of seen the frustrations with it when you want to buy or sell lots of cards at once, not necessarily, one big card. And so really by having an experience in collecting the lower end of the market on a serious level where that's what I really primarily care about, I think that has given me a lot of insights to kind of what other people like me would like to do. And that's really the most of the industry is people that are, collecting that lower end of the market, whether they're engaging on social media or going to shows or not. There's millions of people that just love cards. And, I also think I have a local card store that I'm a part owner in, and I see the same thing is that you see a lot of the people that come through the store are not people that you've necessarily ever seen before. You've never seen them on social media, but they're very passionate. They love to learn. They start to kind of expand their collection, whether it be certain players, certain sets. And I think that's kind of a good reminder each time that, I see different people is that the world's kind of bigger than our little bubble. And
Yeah.
it's going to have to be to kind of continue to grow the hobby and kind of share the thing that we love with everybody. So I think that I try to take my personal experience collecting lower end cards, as well as kind of my experience having a store, going to shows, and just seeing how many new people are there every time I show up to kind of know, hey, there's a group of other people out here that kind of aren't being serviced and maybe sometimes not being thought about by the companies in the industry.
I've said multiple times, I think a lot of companies, or let me rephrase it, many more companies need boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things that I think is a huge advantage for you is knowing what the pulse actually is. Um, and one of the things that was in the news in the last couple of weeks was Costco online is offering a 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle for 100 and some thousand through
Yeah.
Costco's website. And that's just, I mean, obviously they're doing a marketing,
Yeah.
but it shows you that that's not most of the market. when the diamonds are flashed, that's great and that's fantastic. But that's also like buying sneakers. My son wants $600 sneakers every time we go into the store or whatever they cost.
Mhm.
We're not, but that's not what we're buying over and over. He loves his sneakers that we buy. But
Yeah.
you got to take the time in the presentation. And I'll tell you, some stores are better at showing us stuff in our price range, um, and
Mhm.
he leaves just as happy. So that I kind of take that analogy that there's something for everybody in that situation. Now, one of the things, or a couple of the things I think make buy sports cards unique is the selling and listing process.
Mhm.
Can you talk about, because right on the website you talk about the bulk upload? How does that even work? I'm dying to actually know what is that and how does it work?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of two sides of the same coin, which make our site really unique. So one of the things is when I went through the process of both buying and selling cards over the last, couple decades. I'm not that old, but just with my experience and time, is that the process has always been presented to both the buyer and seller kind of as this blank slate, and then you've got to piece together everything to find what you want. And one of the great things about sports cards is that there's a lot of information on them. This makes it difficult to get it all together, but it's something that's provided on checklist, and there's a lot of great resources, and there's a lot of things that you can do as well to build up data and make it really easy for both the buyer and the seller. So, one of the things that we do that really helps the seller is the fact that we've got this checklist data where we have over 17 million different cards in our database. We have about 7.5 million images in the database. And so what this allows for is when you think about the process of listing a card, you've got to enter the sport, the year, the set, the player, the card number, the team, any specific attributes about the card. Is it rookie card? Is it serial numbered? Is it autographed? And it can be a really monotonous process. Sometimes it's difficult to find, honestly. The manufacturers, I think, could do a much better job of providing some of this information, whether it be putting the parallels names on the back or making the card number more,
Yep.
distinguishable from the player's number, which for some reason they have a large number on the back as well. And so, we've built this catalog up so that when sellers go and they can just type in a few key metrics to look a card up, or if they're doing a bulk upload, they can pull up the whole checklist. And then at that point, all they've got to do is have the corresponding condition, price, and quantity. And so you've taken 20 pieces of information that you may have to enter on a site like eBay and cut it down to two or three on our site. And what this does is it allows people to really save a lot of time. I mean, 85 to 90% savings when listing individual cards. And then you multiply that out. So if you've got a new set of, 2023 Tops Update, and you want to go through and, you just open a box and you have, 50, 60 base cards from that set, all you've got to do is go through and enter baseball 2022 Tops Update and then generate the checklist within our site on the bulk upload. And now all that information is entered. We have stock images showing, we have the player's information, all the attributes, the card numbers, everything showing. All you've got to go do is enter your price, enter your quantity, and if you want to attach your own images rather than use our stock images, you can. And so by doing this, we've had sellers that have listed 25,000 cards in an afternoon. Whereas, I don't know how many years of my life I may have to give up to list 25,000 cards on other platforms just because the process isn't built for people like us. And I think that's what it kind of keeps coming back to for us, is that we try to build the site for our users. And by focusing on saving both buyers and sellers a lot of time by being organized for them, it's pretty crazy how much friction is reduced and how much inventory and buying gets unlocked by doing that.
I break into a cold sweat thinking about putting that many cards on eBay.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't see my children grow up. So definitely an advantage. You mentioned a couple things are interesting, and something else that I think is fascinating. Can you talk about? You mentioned that you can either upload your own image or you have stock images. So
Mhm.
if somebody doesn't upload their own image, they choose the condition of the card. Is that is that how the process works?
Yeah. So the way that kind of the images work, and it's something we've kind of talked to our users as well, just to see if we need to add additional requirements. But right now, raw cards require no image from the user, so you can always use the stock image. You can always use your own image too, and we recommend that you do, and we have a lot of information and data to back that up that we tell sellers about. Graded cards require an image just because we want to make sure that the certs can be verified, that it's a legitimate slab, all of those things. It's something we'll probably expand, but people will ask us about it. And really, the big thing is a lot of the cards that are listed on our site are this low into the market. And so when you think about kind of the minimum price on our site's 25 cents, we would say we'd rather a card at 25 cents be listed without an image than not be listed at all, because at that point you give the buyer the choice. It doesn't mean you have to buy it. And I understand a lot of people would say, I don't want to buy any cart sight unseen. But at the end of the day, if I'd rather give somebody the chance to buy it if they want, because there are a lot of cards I think people would be fine to buy without an image. And so while we push for them, it's not a requirement, because that starts to create so much friction, especially if you've got 25,000 cards to list in an afternoon, that may be cut down to 250 at most if you've got to image every single one of them. And at the end of the day, if it's a base card that's in pretty good condition, it's not the end of the world for whoever's receiving it. And we have protections for the buyer in case that the damage is beyond kind of the scope of our condition guidelines. And so, yes, we have those stock images. They can always attach their own images to the picture, but if they attach nothing, then our stock image kind of gets substituted. And when a buyer goes on the marketplace and selects that listing, there'll be a banner that shows up that says no seller image, so that they're aware what they're seeing is still the stock image. It's not been changed to show a seller specific image or a scan. And so that's the best way we're kind of able to be transparent and make sure that we're able to save people time, be transparent with the buyer, and get as many cards as possible online.
And from what I've seen when I've used the site, your stock image is a clean image. You're not showing a condition one on a new card. So people can easily see what they're to make sure it matches their card. I find that to be one of the easiest things. If I'm not sure, like you talked about, there's 50 million parallels. Being able to actually see that is helpful. Now you do graded and raw both now.
Yep.
Yeah. How has the graded side been? Is that because I noticed a lot more listings that were graded?
Yeah. So one of the things about that is when we started out in the market, what we started to see is, because our kind of value proposition at this point is saving time and making it easier, is the people that are saving the most time and that prefer it being easy are the ones that are using the product the most. So it's the sellers that have lots of inventory that they'd like to list. It's the buyers that have lots of cards they'd like to buy. And so generally that's going to be stuff that's on this lower end of the market. One of the great things, I think, and it's really a testament to us getting traction in the marketplace and people, seeing the vision for what we want to do, is that when you start out on the lower end of the cards and people start to get more sales and they start to see more traction and they start to see more opportunity and interact with customers that say, hey, do you have this? Hey, do you have that? Is that they start to list their more expensive cards. And so not only do you see going from lower end raw cards to graded cards, but you also see better raw cards showing up on the site, stuff that's worth hundreds of dollars rather than stuff that's worth, hundreds of pennies. And so that's really where, we've definitely seen that more people are gravitating towards the site to start to list graded cards. And it's a trend that we expect to continue for the next year. And we also have a lot of incentives to do so, because we really want to become a marketplace that is able to service every type of collector. I feel like the lower end has been forgotten about completely. So that's where we started. But from there, we want to kind of move up the value chain so that we can kind of be hopefully an end all be all where people go to buysportscards.com as one of their options, to see if we have it. And with, right now we're about to pass 8.4 million cards, and we have, about 1,150,000 different types of cards on the site. We want to become the largest selection of sports cards online so that people consider us when they're looking for stuff.
Well, I just typed in a couple players that I wanted to browse before we were talking, and I will say I couldn't get through it all because there was a lot of pages of the players. So that's awesome. That many options is cool. Two things: your site is visually appealing. Can you talk about the user interface and how important that is to you? And also, what are the fees? How do you support this site, and what can people expect?
Yeah. So when it comes to the visual design of the site, I think one of the big things that it seems like we've gotten right, at least from the feedback of our users, is that the last couple of years has been an influx of collectors, but it's also been an influx of companies that want to get into the space with a lot of good ideas. Some good, some bad, obviously. I think one of the things that we wanted to take is that this is an industry where you have people from 8 to 80, or that are collecting. And so we really wanted to make sure that it's something that everybody can use. And technology is great. And if you look at a lot of the big companies in the industry, they've been pretty stagnant when it comes to the technology. But I think that the technology should be stuff that's under the hood that's working rather than something that is overwhelming on the surface. Because if it's something where you've got to convince somebody that may not be as technologically savvy, or somebody that's younger that may not, be as familiar with how to use things on the internet, you don't want to complicate the process. And so we've really decided to make it clean, to make it streamlined, and really use the bulk of the technology behind the scenes to improve the user's experience rather than try to blow them away with a lot of crazy stuff on the interface. And so I think that's really where we are kind of a good blend of, the nuts and bolts sites of the past, as well as kind of the newer age sites that, have the bells and whistles. So we kind of try to blend that in a more seamless way so that people don't get overwhelmed. And so I think that we've seen, some success with that design, and it took a lot of kind of effort and thoughtfulness to make sure that we could get there. Because, sometimes I get on some of these sites, not necessarily just in the industry, but in other industries, and you don't even, they're so advanced that I don't even know how to use them.
If you're
And
listening on the podcast, I'm laughing hysterically in agreement.
yeah, so that's been one of the things. I spent a lot of time looking at sites within our industry and just e-commerce sites in general. And I went through and used the site and said, okay, all of them seem to have the cart here. All of them have the logo in the corner here. And, you start to make sense of what should be there in the way that it is. And then from there, you take parts of other sites that you really like, and it kind of becomes an amalgamation of, the best aspects of your favorite sites. And so there's still a lot of things that we want to improve on, but that's kind of how we've gotten to where we've gotten to. And we've got pretty good feedback on that approach.
Fees and cost for users, sellers, what would those be?
Yeah, so when it comes to buying and selling on the site, there's no fees from buysportscards.com. So, if you make an account, use a buyer or a seller, there's no charge to you. For buyers, there's no buyer premium. For sellers, there's no seller fee. There's no listing fee. There's no membership fee. The only thing that ever gets deducted from the seller at this point is the credit card processing fee. So if you run a transaction and the buyer buys $100 worth of cards from you, they're going to take the 3.4% plus the 30 cents for the transaction. And then they send the $96.50 to us. We send all $96 to the seller. And, really the reason that we've done this is it's been a way that we've been able to get people into the ecosystem to see what we've built. Maybe it's just kind of Midwestern values, but I ultimately really believe that if you do a good job and you represent the user and provide something valuable to them, in the long run, it's going to pay 10 times more than trying to hit them over the head as they enter the site, and make money off of them. And so by keeping the site free, we've seen huge growth. We've also had a lot of the people that are most passionate about our site spend a lot of time spreading the word. And that word of mouth is critical in this industry, as I'm sure Danny knows, and probably the people listening know. And so by having the site be free and kind of being able to prove it, it's like, if you're as good as you say you are, if you make it as easy as you say that you do, then let me get in there and let me, put some stress on different parts of the site and see if it is worth it for me. And, at the end of the day, when people ask lots of questions, I say, the only way you're going to see is if you use it, and it's free. So there's no obligation. And, those are some of the people that have become the biggest converts to what we're doing. So, I take it as a testament. It's been over a year and a half now that the site has been completely free. I've been able to personally, through funding the website myself, use other business stuff that I have, including my card store, to support the site. It's something that I'm able to do for a little bit longer. And so, that's something that I'm happy to do as well, because it builds an affinity with our customers. And I think that we're probably the only site that has users asking us, saying, hey, you really should be taking something from us. You really should, we want to give you money. So I think that that's a better position to be in than kind of the inverse, where you see people that hate the companies that they work with because they're charging so much and not really returning the value that they would expect.
Well, you can always let people know you're always accepting gifts, no questions asked. So
Exactly. Yeah.
um, the hobby's been in a kind of a weird spot the last 6, 12, 24 months. Moving forward, how do you see the hobby? How do you see your site, reacting with the hobby? What kind of move, looking in the next year or so, where do you see yourself in the hobby?
Yeah. So ultimately for buysportscards.com, I hope that we just continue to make the progress that we're making. So, by the end of the year, we expect to have over 10 million cards on the site, which will make us one of the largest inventories online. which will be great. And we expect that, what you start to see, I think, in any new business is that things start to, snowball and pick up momentum. And as you get, out there more and you get more success, more people hear about you and more people give you a chance. So we really expect that, we're going to do some pretty cool things. We've got some cool features. We're hoping to get an app out. So there's just a lot of exciting things to make the process easier of using our site, make it more accessible to all types of users. In terms of the industry, I think we're kind of in a holding pattern right now. One of the nice things is that, whenever the market has kind of gone through stuff like it's going through now, is people still want to scratch that itch to collect. So they may not be in a position anymore where they're buying, cards that are hundreds of dollars, every week or every month, but they still want to collect. And I think when you come on a site like buysportscards.com, you start to see these stock images that are, beautiful and allow you to kind of window shop and find new things. Is you say, okay, well, I'm an Albert Pujols collector. I can buy hundreds of Albert Pujols cards, for a couple $100.
Right.
I can sit here and buy 20 cards for $8 on this site. And by able to do that, it kind of scratches my collecting itch still in a tougher market where maybe things are tighter for me personally. And so we've really seen a lot of people that still want to collect, but now they kind of come down to the part of the market where the site currently is in the lower end. And, I think that that's a good thing, because I think when people start to rediscover collecting and rediscover kind of what I think cards are about, not that there's anything wrong with investing or anything else. I mean, I have a business that sells cards as a store. But I think when people rediscover their love for cards, they're able to tie it to a player, a team, a time in their life that they were passionate about these things. I think that's when the industry really prospers. I think that's when we convert the most new people into the industry. And I think that ultimately that's the most steady foundation that the industry's been built on for 150 years. And I think that it's kind of a cold water that's been poured on the market per se. You see a lot of doom and gloom, but I ultimately think that this is going to be a time where it's really fertile ground for new businesses and also new collectors to kind of get in, get their feet wet, and get ready kind of for the next upswing as Fanatics in some of these other countries hopefully keep pushing the industry forward over the next several years.
You gave a great piece of advice that I've given on other shows, Albert Pujols, and I'll throw Ichiro in there. I think are future
Yeah.
Hall of Famers. Right now, their stuff is, I believe, to be undervalued and the great type of card to collect right now. That's a great example of a player that has a lot of cards out there and a lot of numbered cards and a lot of stuff to browse through, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. There's no question about it. So that's a lot of the fun of why we got into this is who do we think is great, and can we get their cards, and are my players any good and stuff like that. So I like the getting back to the collecting aspect.
Yeah.
All right. So where are we as far as today? What is the number one thing you want people to know if they wanted to spread the word about buysportscards.com? What should they be telling people?
Yeah, well, ultimately, I just tell them to say the truth. I really, one of the biggest ways we've converted people is to say, like I said, give the site a shot. And ultimately, I also don't try to convince people that I don't think would be a good fit to use the site. There's people out there that collect 52 manels, and that's just not where we're at. We're really for kind of people that are like the meat and potatoes collectors. A couple $100 and less is really the sweet spot at this point. And so I just say, give us a chance. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that we're doing. And even outside of BSC, I think that's something that is, it's been beautiful to see within our own company and some of my friends who have companies as well. I'd say that this is probably the biggest thing for them is if you like what somebody's doing, it may not be everything you want at this point. First of all, give them feedback, give them candid feedback. We've went back and forth with our users and gotten some, harsh messages, but things that we needed to hear, things that we needed to improve on. And so that's one thing I would ask personally for us is if you have feedback, if there's stuff that you'd like to see, things that you're having issues with, send it to us. A lot of times we can fix it either immediately or in the long run. It's something that we'll have on the site. But I would say that if you're working with newer businesses in this industry or any other industry, if you like what they're doing, then find different ways to support them. And that doesn't just mean money. Sometimes it's just spreading the word. And really, I think that that's one of the biggest things is that we've seen the word of mouth has been a huge thing in getting people to our website. And so that's like the best thing that you can do ultimately is to share the word about something you're passionate about, and don't think that it's insignificant to do that. And so I would just say if you like what somebody's doing, whether it be buysportscards.com or another site or another service in the industry, just tell somebody about it because it costs a lot to advertise, especially to small businesses. And you telling your friends something means a lot more than somebody shoving a Facebook ad in your face. And so I would just say try to support things that you're passionate about, support things that you think could be helpful in the industry. And I hope that we can convince you that buysportscards.com is going to help do that for a certain part of this market.
Connor, thank you for joining me.
Yep. No, thanks for having me on.
No, always a pleasure. Can we schedule you for an update after the first of the year?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks for being on. For everybody else, another edition of Hobby News Daily, and we will catch you on the flip side. Connor, I'll see you in the green room. Have a good day, everybody.